If you've been scrolling through endless TV lists, watching side-by-side comparisons, and still feel stuck wondering which set actually lives up to the hype, this review is here to clear the fog. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've spent the last few weeks watching movies, binge-watching series, and playing a couple of PlayStation 5 sessions on the Sony OLED 55-inch BRAVIA XR A80L, so I can tell you exactly how it behaves in a real living room, not just on a spec sheet. First off, the biggest hesitation most shoppers have with a premium OLED is whether the picture quality will still look impressive in a bright daytime room. Sony's cognitive processor XR promises to understand what you're watching and optimize every frame, and in practice it does a solid job of balancing deep blacks with enough peak brightness to stay visible when the sun is shining through the windows. I set the TV up opposite a large kitchen window, and even during the brightest part of the day, the HDR scenes in the dark night retain detail in the shadows without washing out the highlights. That's a real win if you're not planning to mount a blackout curtain just for movie night. Now, let's talk about what makes this model feel different from the generic OLEDs you see everywhere. The panel itself delivers the classic Sony OLED look, inky blacks that make a star-filled sky look almost tactile, and colors that stay true even after hours of watching. The billions of accurate colors claim isn't just marketing fluff. When I switched from a standard 4K LED to this OLED, I noticed the skin tones in a drama series were more natural, and the saturated reds in an animated film didn't look oversaturated. That kind of color fidelity matters if you're a cinephile who cares about the director's palette. The built-in Google TV platform is another practical advantage. All your streaming apps are aggregated under one menu, and the voice search works well enough that you can say play the new season of Stranger Things on Netflix and it starts without you having to flick through separate inputs. I also tested the recommendation engine over a few days, and it began suggesting shows that matched my viewing history fairly accurately. Nothing groundbreaking, but it saves a few clicks when you're flipping between Netflix, Disney Plus, and HBO Max. Gaming is where Sony really tries to future-proof this set. The HDMI 2.1 ports support 4K at 120Hz, variable refresh rate, and auto-low latency mode, which means you can plug the PS5 directly and enjoy smooth motion without manually tweaking settings. The game menu consolidates picture presets, response time, and HDR toggles into a single overlay, so you don't have to dive into deep picture menus mid-session. In a fast-paced shooter, I saw virtually zero input lag, hardly noticeable compared to a dedicated gaming monitor. If you're the type who switches between couch coupe and solo campaigns, that seamless transition is a genuine convenience. However, the strengths don't erase every trade-off. The biggest practical weakness is price. This 55-inch OLED sits in the upper mid-range bracket, and while you're paying for Sony's processing power and the OLED panel, there are cheaper alternatives that still offer decent HDR performance. If you're on a tight budget and can live with a good enough LED, the savings are significant. Another point to consider is the need for a robust internet connection if you want to make the most of BRAVIA Core. Sony's own streaming service offers 4K titles at very high bit rates, but the library is relatively limited compared to Netflix or Amazon Prime. If you're planning to rely on BRAVIA Core as your primary source of high-quality content, you might find the selection lacking. Who should buy this TV? First, anyone who values picture depth above all else: movie lovers, series binge watchers, and photographers who enjoy displaying high-resolution images will appreciate the OLED contrast and color accuracy. Second, gamers who own a PS5 or are thinking of upgrading to a next-gen console will benefit from the HDMI 2.1 features and the dedicated game menu. Finally, households that already use Google's ecosystem, Nest speakers, Chromecast, etc., will find the integration smooth and intuitive. Who might skip it? If your primary use is daytime TV in a bright living space and you rarely watch HDR content, a high-end LED could give you comparable brightness for less money. Also, if you're a casual viewer who only watches a handful of streaming services and doesn't need the extra processing power, the premium price may not translate into a noticeable day-to-day improvement. Lastly, renters who are hesitant to invest in a pricey OLED that they may have to move later might look for a more portable, lower-cost option. One subtle practical detail that often gets overlooked is the TV's sound. The built-in speakers are decent for casual listening, delivering clear dialogue, but they won't replace a dedicated soundbar or a home theater system. If you plan to use this as your primary movie hub, budgeting for an external audio solution will round out the experience. On the flip side, the TV's thin design and minimal bezels make wall mounting straightforward, which can free up floor space and give